I'm Nicola Talent and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts. Clodagh, for those people who don't know what deliberating is and what this point of the trial is, as it comes to this, just explain what's going on down in the courts.
So after the prosecution and the defence rest their cases, so they've called all the witnesses that they have in this trial, then it's down to the judge to, he gives a summary of the case and directs the jury on the charges that's going to be on their charge sheet. So in this case, while Noel was charged with murder, which he is denied, the judge also offered them the verdict of manslaughter. So at the moment they are sent off to deliberate on that. So that means that they have to come up with their verdict and decide what they are going to conclude. Yeah, whether it's not guilty, guilty of murder, or not guilty of murder but guilty of manslaughter.
And today's date is the
3rd of August.
Thank you.
Numbers. I
was looking frantically on my iPad there to try and find the date. Oh, there it is, yeah. So it's the 3rd of August, just for anybody who's listening, so as they know where we're at. And you've just come back up from the courts this evening. So you'd be going back in tomorrow morning where they will continue these deliberations. Was it this morning they first went out?
No. So yesterday, it was actually surprising that they went out yesterday so late. So they deliberated for about 35 minutes yesterday evening. What happened was, once the judge had he spent the morning and then into the afternoon, so he gives a summary of the facts. He has to explain the law to the jury. He says that he is the judge of law, but they are the judge of facts. So after he did all that, it was about 3:15 maybe, and he sent them off to do what they wanted for the evening. He told them to come back whenever they were ready to go, and they came back in around 4:20 and said it was time for them to finish up for the day.
And of course the jury have to be given the time that they require to go through the evidence in the case, to consider it, to, debate it out between them, to work out which way they want to go. They also have to be given regular breaks because, should anything occur that they weren't, if there was a conviction, in cases where there is a conviction, that could be used perhaps that they weren't given adequate breaks or they weren't given adequate information. So this morning they came in and they looked for something which wasn't available to them. Yeah,
so just before lunch, what happens is every morning you go into the court for a set time. The jury will be there. The judge will start the trial. Basically, he will dismiss them to deliberate. When lunch comes around, they're brought back in again and dismissed by the judge. And then after lunch, the same things they come back into the courtroom and dismissed once again. And the same thing happens at the end of the day. So it's very kind of procedural. But before lunch today, before they left for lunch, a note was passed up to the judge through the foreman. So the foreman is kind of the leader of the group, so to speak, like would be
spokesman.
The spokesperson, yeah. And the notes asked for them, they were asking for a diagram of the injuries that Nora Sheehan had suffered in the case, throughout her death or her killing. So they asked for the diagram of injuries to refer to during the deliberations. However, the judge said while that wouldn't be available to them, it was something that he could summarise for them again. So he could go over it again. He said, look, think about it over lunch and come back to me and let me know what you want to do. If you want to sit in court again and we can go through it, we can. And they came back and they said that, no, that wouldn't be necessary.
That wasn't necessary because usually a jury will they'll keep notes themselves or they'll make notes when they're deliberating. And they can refer to them. They were obviously looking to be able to have a visual of what they were. It gives us an indication of where their heads are at, and that's always the way with a jury when they come back in and ask for something. It gives you the first really sign of what it is they're discussing.
Yeah.
And clearly it is those injuries that were certainly occupying their discussion time before they went looking for that diagram. So do you want to go back over those? What it was that... It was interesting, and it was Mary Cassidy, the former state pathologist, was called by the defence to give evidence on behalf of Noel Long's defence team, and she stated that there was essentially no clear cause of death.
Yeah, she said that there was no clear cause of death. So she started by looking at so what she did was obviously she wasn't the one who did the initial post-mortem. These were the notes from Dr. Coakley, who conducted the post-mortem back in 1981, and she had various notes from him. So First of all, there was the first kind of initial scene visit. So he went there the day she was found, returned the next day to kind of observe and to supervise the body being removed from the crime scene to the hospital for the post-mortem. And then there was notes from the post-mortem itself. So on his first visit, he noticed the only injuries he noticed was a small blood-stained mucus in the lower part of her nose, a bruise to her upper lip, and her lower lip was very pale. On second visit, which was the next day, he noticed that her head and neck and upper shoulders were a dirty red colour. She had bruising on her nose and her cheeks. Again, she had bruising on her mouth and gums, and she also had a strap bruising, he described it as, from her running from the left of her mouth along her lower jaw. Now, this seemed to have been caused by, she had a dress on, and this dress was pulled up around the lower jaw and mouth, and it was zipped on at the back, so that had caused bruising from the pressure. She had various bruising under and behind her ears. She had some small hemorrhages on the skin at the base of her neck, and she had superficial scratches on her shoulders and her buttock. And Dr. Mary Cassidy concluded from those scratches that it was likely that she had been murdered elsewhere, and her body was then dumped at Shippool Woods, where she was found, and dragged into the position where she was eventually located. She had various bruises on her forearms and arms. She had a scratches on her hands and fingers. She had a bruise on one of her shins. The tissue in her neck was congested. She also had this, what was described by Dr. Cassidy as kind of unique or strange bruising on her spinal column and her abdomen. And she said that had likely been caused by the body being dropped during transport, him moving the body, or the body being moved, or could have been caused by somebody kneeling on her either. There was no defensive injuries. There was no damage to her neck structures. She also noted that there was no gunshot or stab wounds that could, indicate a cause of death.
Yeah.
And she had an injury in the anterior wall of her vagina as well.
So the state's case is, which Noel Long denies, and that's why we have a trial, because
Yes.
he's pleaded not guilty. But the state's case is that this lady, Nora Sheehan, was out walking that night in June 1981, that Noel Long picked her up in his car, and that he assaulted and then murdered her.
Yeah.
They haven't given an exact scenario, have they? Or have they given that much?
No, they haven't been able to determine where in the state she was murdered. They say an unknown place. There's no information about what time she may have been picked up. She went missing on the 6th of June, wasn't found until the 12th of June. Dr. Cassidy says, when the body was found, there was some nature had kind of taken its course. The body was decomposing. There had been rodent activity. There was also some maggots and flies on the body. It was described by the guard who first responded to the scene that he had to, swat the blue bottles out of the way with a hurley. And she said that kind of decomposition and that activity was consistent with her dying not long after she had went missing and then being dumped there. But no, there's no kind of scenario. There's no evidence of somebody seeing him taking her, or seeing him killing her, or seeing her dumping her there. It is all just circumstantial evidence.
And of course the state's case was that of murder. It's the judge who's offered the jury the option of manslaughter, and no doubt he explained to them in detail the difference. Of course, murder is premeditated act, whereas manslaughter is not.
Yes. So when he was kind of describing to the jury what to do in terms of their judgment. So yeah, what he said to them was, he kind of spoke about the fact that there's no statute of limitations on murder, and that if you, and Grehan had said, senior counsel for the prosecution had said that, when it comes to murder, nobody is, excluded from that. They're not out of the arm of the law, he said. So yeah.
In other words, because of this passage of time in this case?
Yes, because of the passage of time, exactly. So the judge offered the jury murder and manslaughter as charges. So murder, he explained to them, there's two types of homicide. So murder is one, manslaughter is the other. In murder, the definition is intent to cause serious harm or injury to somebody. Whereas, so that is, the intent is it's called the mens rea. It's the mind, the thought that you want to do something, and the action obviously itself then being the killing. With manslaughter is just the killing. So it is not the intent to do so. So they are the two of the options that he gave them, as well as the option of not guilty.
Because, you have to get your head around that a little bit, because people in the ordinary course of their day don't really consider the differences between the two. Obviously, the jury will be very, very focused on, what constitutes each. So what is the atmosphere like? Is Noel Long, is he floating around the courts basically as the jury are out? Nobody stays sitting in the courtroom waiting for a jury to come back,
except for the media.
Okay.
The media bench is the only one that's kind of full when there's nobody else there. So there is a couple of people waiting around. Yes, the family of Nora Sheehan are also there and they're waiting. Noel Long is there as well. The atmosphere, I mean, it's so quiet 1 minute and next of all, something's going to happen and everyone's rushing back in, but it's because, the jury are being sent out for lunch or whatever, and everyone's to see if there'll be a note passed or what's going on. It is a long day and it's a boring day. Kind of everyone's on edge almost. If there's a different sort of sound, you think, oh.
And it's exactly that. You can't leave. You have to stay. But some of those days you get the whole day waiting, and then they come back to say that they'll be back again tomorrow. And, there has been cases, I've covered trials where the jury have been out for days on end. So, we simply don't know what's happening, and we'll stick with it though, I think, until it comes to an end and we see what the conclusion of this case is.
Yes.
So, Clodagh Meaney, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicola.